everyone and welcome back to an interview with Mr. Rajesh Talwar. This is your host Ananya Sharma. So the book in discussion today is Kaash Kashmir. So Rajesh, we understand that it is a play. So why a play and why specifically Kashmir?
Hi Ananya, it's good to be back with you and your team once again. And yes, it's a play, Kaash Kashmir. And I wasn't so sure about writing a play on the subject because I thought that there are already plays on it. But when I looked around, I could not find anything. There was just one play, Kashmir, which was staged in Mumbai, where the actress Radhika Apte, she acted in it, but that script was not available. And so there is hardly any theatre on Kashmir, which is visible on the internet or talked about even otherwise. There is a fair amount of writing on the subject. In fact, there's a lot of writing on the subjects. There are hundreds of books on Kashmir, and there is a fair amount of cinema on the subject. But there were two reasons I decided to write this play. One was there's hardly any plays on the subject, and the second is that although there has been a lot of cinema, the cinema has focused on issues in Kashmir other than the issue on which this play focuses. This play is focused on the situation of the Kashmiri Pandit. It discusses Kashmir as a whole, but it talks about the Kashmiri Pandit in particular. And I think this is long overdue. Such a major tragedy has happened to the Kashmiri Pandits, and it's so little spoken about. The Pandits themselves have spoken as much as they could, but their voice is not being heard. And the narrative in cinema is all focused on army atrocities within the country. The narrative does not speak of the tragedy that befell hundreds of thousands of Kashmiri Pandits in early 1990. So I believe this kind of a play, it throws up an important narrative, discusses Kashmir as a whole, but it discusses the situation within the context of Kashmiri Pandits. Kashmiri Pandits are center stage in this play. Kaash, of course, refers to if only, and Kaash Kashmir suggests that Kashmir, there are so many if onlys. If only Pandit Nehru had been more practical and less of a dreamy idealist. If only Sardar Patel had been put in charge of sorting out the Kashmir issue like he sorted out the rest of the states that made up the Indian Union. If only in 1948 we hadn't given over or allowed the Pakistanis to take a large part of Kashmir, which is today goes by the name of Pakistani occupied Kashmir. If only in 1971 when we won the war we had prevailed upon the Pakistanis to accept a settlement that would have created peace and enduring peace in Kashmir. There are so many if onlys. There's so much Kaash. There's an Urdu saying, पल में खता हुई सदियों ने सजा पाई. The mistake was made in a moment. That fatal mistake was made in a moment, and centuries have suffered the consequences. And that is the case of Kashmir, today's Kashmir. And so I think Kaash Kashmir is a very appropriate title.
Can you tell us a general storyline of the play?
Well, the opening scene shows a situation where there is a Kashmiri Pandit boy, Rohan. He's sitting with a Kashmiri Muslim girl, Ayesha, and he professes his undying love to Ayesha. It's a very romantic and tender scene between two very young people. So the focus is on this Kashmiri Pandit family that is living next to the Shahs, a Muslim family, a Kashmiri Muslim family. Their friendship, the friendship between the children, and the love that is blossoming between a young Kashmiri Pandit boy and a Muslim Kashmiri girl. Soon after this is a happy setting. The families are both very happy. They send over things like neighbours do during festivals. If it's Eid, the Shahs will send over something. If it's Ram Navami, the Pandits will send over something to the Shahs. It's just a typical Indian neighbourhood. Two large houses, beautiful houses. But soon after this, some events take place which force that Kashmiri Pandit family to leave Srinagar. What are those terrible events? So I describe them. What were the circumstances under which the Pandit families had to leave Kashmir? Who were threatened? Who was killed? And the scene shifts to a very dark and sinister setup where the masjids in Srinagar are being used to threaten the Kashmiri Pandits. There is planning across the border. Benazir Bhutto is instructed the army that we need to throw the Pandits out and we have to use all devices available at us. The newspapers in Srinagar, they're taking out big advertisements in which they are warning the Pandits that they have to leave. And a particular fateful night, there are threats issued. The Kashmiris are told, the Kashmiri Pandits are told, we are going to rape your daughters. Leave your daughters behind. We will convert Kashmir into Pakistan, but we want to have your women as our concubines. And if you don't leave, we are going to enter your homes and we are going to rape them. Before this terrible incident, which forces the Rohan's family to leave Srinagar, there is a build-up. And Rohan's father is very concerned. There's a build-up. Kashmiri Pandits have been massacred. They are being massacred. And this family then, they have to leave Srinagar, their beautiful house in Srinagar, and go and live in a refugee camp in Jammu. And then they go to another refugee camp. So it talks about their struggles, their difficulties, how the family rehabilitates itself. Rohan decides to join the army. He joins the Indian Army, and after some years of service, 10 years after the exodus, he is sent back to Srinagar as an Indian Army officer. So it's a very dramatic setting, and but the setting has been engineered in such a way as to bring the whole Kashmir situation alive, and to show what was the suffering, what were the tortures inflicted on the poor Pandit family. The Kashmiri Pandits were not supported by our own government. They are living as refugees till this date in their own country. There has been no support. So I think from a theatre point of view, the issues are very poignant. And there are lots of questions which will be there in the viewer's mind. When Rohan returns to Srinagar, what will happen? What has happened to Ayesha? Will he meet her? Will their love be rekindled? What do the Shahs feel about what happened to the Pandit family? How will Rohan assume his new role as checking counter-terrorism in the Kashmir Valley? So a lot of things are discussed, including, for example, the all-important question, should the valley remain with India? And I put forward very clear and convincing arguments why it should.
So you've just said that you think that the Kashmir Valley should stay in India, with India. Why is it that you think that way?
Ananya, there are many reasons why I strongly believe that the movement in Kashmir is delegitimate. In fact, it's fair to say this is what Mr. Shah, a Muslim professor in the play, he tells his son, his misguided son. He tells him, the movement for freedom of Kashmir lost all legitimacy the day the Pandits were asked to leave. And the son says, why? He says, well, if a leadership shows that it's not going to treat the minorities properly, it has no right to create a nation. It has no right to think that it can create a nation. And this has happened to Kashmiri Pandits today. What Kashmiriyat meant Kashmiri, a particular culture, has slowly been destroyed not because of the Indians but because of the efforts of the Pakistanis. For example, the Kashmiri Muslim, he used to live in a relatively free way. He was open-minded. But now what has happened? There are disputes between Sunnis and Shias. There is a kind of radicalization, an Islamic radicalization which is taking place in Srinagar because money is being poured in from Pakistan, has been poured in over decades to try and radicalize them. And the Shias in Kashmir, and there are a fair amount of Shias, they are worried. The Shias have no fear of remaining in India. There's a narrative which is being thrown up, which is not properly countered by the Indian media. I should say the Indian media has been very irresponsible. So yesterday it was the Kashmiri Pandits, in the future it will be the Shias. Shias are being targeted. And Shah says, do you know, he tells his son, do you know your mother is a Shia? And do you know that she feels unsafe at what's happening in the valley? There are Pakistani academics who see this also. For example, Parvez Putboy, a Pakistani academic, he says, what Pakistan has done in Kashmir, in Indian Kashmir, is terrible. What they have done is they have tried to Talibanize the place. They have tried to introduce radical Islam. They have tried to introduce practices that are forcing Kashmiri Muslim women to start using the veil all over again. They have reignited disputes between Sunnis and Shias. And India is a place where minorities have felt secure. If Kashmir, the way Kashmir is changing, the future minorities cannot be secure. And in any case, Kashmir threw in its lot with India in 1948 when the king of Kashmir, he signed the instrument of accession. So there's no doubt in my mind that the best interests of Kashmir will be served if they continue to remain in India, apart from the legalities of the issues. Let me say one more thing. For example, in India there's a lot of talk about Ayodhya, and certainly the destruction of the Babri Masjid is something which I would not support, which no right-thinking person would support. But we need to see the larger context. In India, since independence, has there been a single case of a mosque being destroyed, with the exception of the Babri Masjid? Something which is regrettable? Not to my knowledge. But there have been numerous incidents. Lots of temples have been razed to the ground in Srinagar, areas around Srinagar. Temples have been vandalized, temples have been destroyed in the valley and adjoining regions. Why should we be so cavalier about this? Forget what's happened to temples in India by extremist Muslim fundamentalists in the Kashmir valleys, neighboring areas, but in Pakistan itself, mosques keep getting destroyed. And it's not that mosques get destroyed alone. Mosques are bombed. On an average, every 3 months, there's a mosque, a Shia mosque in Pakistan, which is bombed. I think the Shikarpur incident is very well known. A Shia mosque was bombed. 100 people died. By some estimates, there were several hundred who were injured. So in Pakistan is not safe. Sunnis go around hunting for Shias to kill. So we need to see India and Pakistan in a broader context. So minorities in any case will not be safe.
So Rajesh, coming back to the Kashmiri Pandits issue, what about the human rights group? Don't you think that they have supported them on many occasions?
I have been a human rights lawyer myself, Ananya, and sad to say, my experience with the human rights community in India is that they have not supported the Kashmiri Pandits. Something terrible happened, but nobody came forward to help them. The Indian government didn't help them, the Congress didn't help them, the BJP didn't help them, no government helped them. And not only that, the civil society doesn't seem to have helped them either. Human rights lawyers in India, they support campaigns against the presence of the army. You have somebody like Prashant Bhushan who feels a plebiscite should be held on the presence of the army. But those same human rights groups, they will not come forward to defend the situation, the case that Kashmiri Pandits must go back to the valley and a way must be found to make sure that they are safe in the valley. They must be properly housed, they must be made to feel secure. Nothing is happening, nothing has happened. I've spoken to some Supreme Court lawyers who work on human rights and have said, why don't you take up the issue of the Kashmiri Pandits? And I have been shocked to see their reaction. They say, oh, historically the Pandits used to oppress the Muslims. I said, when are you talking about? This is ancient times, and the Pandits were not in any case in power at that time. That was maybe during the time when the Afghans were in power, or before, or some other time when the Sikhs were in power. There may have been some complaints against the Kashmiri Pandits, but to say that you are going to use that to justify why you are not going to take up the issue of Kashmiri Pandits is terrible. This just tells me that the human rights movement in India to a large extent is directed by overseas. There's a colonization of the human rights movement in India because they are not taking up honest, authentic agendas which they should be taking. There is simply no excuse why people haven't come forward to try and help the Kashmiri Pandits return. As a matter of fact, I would say that the Kashmiri Muslims have lost the right to claim that they should have exclusivity in the right of ownership of property in Kashmir. Once the Pandits have been thrown out, and it's not a small number, hundreds of thousands of Pandits have been thrown out, all their properties are lying there. Why should we say that only Kashmiri Muslims can buy them? Only the people who threw them out can buy those Kashmiri Pandit properties. That is something so terrible. And as this play goes on to discuss, once the Pandit family is thrown out, they come to Delhi. There are shopkeepers who come in from Srinagar. They think they can get the Pandit property at throwaway price. So we here are so concerned about refugees in neighboring countries, which we should be. For example, there are hundreds of thousands of Rohingyas who fled and who are now being housed in refugee camps in Bangladesh. India also housed some of those Rohingya refugees. But the point is that before 1990, there were anything, according to certain estimates, between 300,000 to 600,000 Kashmiri Pandits who were living in the valley and neighboring areas in Indian administered Kashmir. And now there are just a few thousand. So all those people, they have been thrown out of a place in their own country where they lived for thousands of years. How can we tolerate this? So there's a deep hypocrisy within the human rights movement in India. There's overseas funding which distorts the narrative. There is a colonization of the human rights movement. And this is a very important reason why something so important as this has not come to the forefront.
So Rajesh, how did the readers react to this play?
The reviews have been a bit saddening and also heartening. Saddening because out of say 50 reviews, 45 people have written, and these are mostly young readers, young viewers. 45 of them have said, we didn't know this had happened. We didn't know that Pandits had suffered so much. And so, it's terrible, the level of ignorance. But that also brings me to the issue of our media. Our media has not been entirely honest. There has been a dishonesty about the media. They have not covered the situation properly. The Kashmiri Pandit situation has not been highlighted. They seem to have been a deliberate attempt to play down what happened to the Kashmiris. In fact, there have been even rumors set aside in the media that, this was a deliberate ruse by the Indian government. The Indian government got the Pandits expelled deliberately because they wanted to clamp down on the freedom movement. These lies have been spread. There is comparatively little literature which controverts it. There is a book by Rahul Pandit, My Moon Has Blood Clots, which speaks about the actual incidents which affected his own family, which compelled his family to leave Kashmir. And but this narrative has been drowned under a larger narrative which is more popular, and it's unfortunate.
So Rajesh, why is it that Pakistan is so hell-bent in intervening in the Kashmir issue?
Pakistan has been troubling us since independence. Actually, in 1948, you remember how they started a proxy war and they sent the Pashtun tribesmen to grab Kashmir, and then the Raja came to India. He requested Pandit Nehru for help, which we provided, and then there was an instrument of accession signed. But what has really made Pakistan determined to break up India, so to speak, is what happened to them in 1971, the creation of Bangladesh. So a lot of Pakistanis, they feel, especially the ones who are there in the Pakistani army, that India is to blame for Pakistan's breakup. This is not true. But yes, it is true that India supported the Mukti Bahini because that was the right thing to do. So Pakistan was broken up. It was shattered into two pieces. Why I say that India was not responsible was because Pakistan, as it exists now, they were responsible. It was anybody's guess. The Bangladeshis strongly outnumbered the northern Pakistanis. The northern Pakistanis were divided in any case between Baluchis, Sindhis, Punjabis. The Bangladeshis were one. So they had to win the elections. But the northern Pakistanis thought themselves to be superior. They could not stomach that Bangladeshis would be setting the agenda. There would be a Bangladeshi prime minister. So they started oppressing. There was a military dictatorship. They countermanded the results of the election, which put Mujibur Rahman as the future prime minister. The war started. And there was rape and genocide on a mass scale. India intervened. And Bangladesh was created. But as a consequence, Pakistan was cut into half. It lost half its nation. This was a wound in the Pakistani psyche. And they said, we are going to do the same to India. You broke us into two, we will cut off your head. So there are men and women in Pakistan who feel that we have to do to India what happened to us. But this is very foolish. Pakistani intellectuals, right-thinking people in Pakistan, they realize this is a blunder which they are committing, which will hit them very badly as well. I mean, Pakistan is half of what happened after 1971. It's just half the country that remained. But even today, if you look at Pakistan, half the country is occupied by a province called Baluchistan. Baluchistan forms more than half of Pakistan. But the Baluchis, they are already waging an independence movement. They want to be free from Pakistan. So at the outset of the play, I go into the motivations. There's a discussion between a Pakistani ISI general who's talking about we not only must we have revenge against India, we must sever Kashmir from it and make up for the lost territory. We lost Bangladesh, we will get this Kashmir to join us. So it's actually not a narrative which is talking about the freedom of the Kashmiris. That is just a ploy, a trick used by the Pakistanis. The narrative, the real narrative is very clear. They want to wrest India administered Kashmir from India and annex it, attach it to Pakistan, get back some of their lost territory in this way. So their bona fides are completely, there are no bona fides at all. If Pakistan were to lose Baluchistan tomorrow, which I would say is not something which is completely unfeasible, nothing would remain. And if they allowed Baluchistan to leave and Pakistan occupied Kashmir to leave as well. I mean, they talk about independence for Kashmir, but they don't talk about independence for the Pakistan occupied Kashmir. Are they going to make them free? They lost Bangladesh. They may lose Baluchistan. Are they going to say, okay, Pakistan occupied Kashmir can also be independent? What will remain of Pakistan? What remains will also be broken up in that case. So Pakistan, in these circumstances, it is waging this war, this foolish war, using armed insurgents, people who are monsters. All the characters in my play are fictional, but there is one character who is real, Hafiz Saeed, who, as most of us know, was the acting commander of the Lashkar-e-Taiba, the organization that was responsible for the massacres in Mumbai. Now this is the same organization which is involved in spending money to recruit unemployed youth in Kashmir, spending money to get young children to stone the Indian army. And unfortunately, as the reviewers to my play wrote, they are ignorant about many aspects because the Indian media doesn't tell them, the Indian government doesn't tell them. The Hindu Pandit expulsion narrative has not been properly explained not only to the world but to Indians. So it's very sad. On the other hand, you have so-called intellectuals like Arundhati Roy, like Pankaj Mishra, people who have no loyalty to the nation, who are just driven by their own agendas. And they talk about the independence of Kashmir in a vacuum. I mean, theoretically, if India were to, I'm just saying theoretically, if this was done, within days, Pakistan would attempt to annex it. There's no doubt in anybody's mind. Pakistan would not say, okay, you made Kashmir independent, now we are going to make Pakistan administered Kashmir independent as well. What is stopping them from doing that right now? Why don't the separatists in Kashmir, why don't they say, Pakistan, you want to prove your bona fides? Make Pakistan occupied Kashmir independent tomorrow. That is not part of the narrative. Pakistan is a shadow of its former self, which included Bangladesh. Balochistan may break away. If they were to lose Pakistan occupied Kashmir as well, what will be left as a nation? And don't also forget that area is very rich in minerals. There's lots of water. So these are things which we need to understand. And it's terrible that our media, our newspapers, our opinion makers, they don't sort of have a proper nationalistic perspective on it. If you are nationalistic about the issue, you are branded as right-wing, and that's unfortunate. Just because you talk about Kashmiri Pandits, their sufferings, their rights, their legitimacy of their return, there are people in this country who will say, oh, you're a right-wing, you're an apologist for the nationalists, the ultra-nationalists. It's good to be nationalist. If Arundhati Roy were to go to the United Kingdom and talk about how Scotland was oppressed, or if she went to the United States and she said, oh, United States took away territories like New Mexico and Louisiana from Mexico, they should be returned to Mexico. She would be thrown out. She would be dismissed. But if she goes there and she talks about Kashmir, she is fated as a human rights defender. There's nothing human rights about it. If she wants to defend human rights, charity has to begin at home. We cannot allow Hindu Pandits to become refugees in their own land. Which nation worth its salt will allow its own people to become refugees in this fashion? So I hope, and the Kashmiri Pandits, they don't have a powerful voice. I should say here that even Bollywood is biased. They will make films like Haider. They will make films like, Land Without Fathers or whatever that is. They will not make a film which talks about what happened to people within their own country, how they became homeless, how they became refugees. Why? Because they are looking at box office numbers. They are looking at what is driving international agendas. I'm saying, be aware of international agendas. Look to your own national interest. If you don't, your nation will suffer. And anybody who is a genuine patriot, he will feel for the Kashmiri Pandits, he will speak for the Kashmiri Pandits, he will want them to return to their home. Come hell high or high water, they have to go back. They have lived there for thousands of years. How can we allow this atrocity in their own country to become homeless, to become refugees. So more people should speak about it.
So Rajesh, can you tell us a bit more about Kashmirian?
Hi Ananya, yes, Kashmiri to my mind represented a very tolerant version of Islam. Just like you have the Kurds in Kurdistan or part of northern Iraq, who represent a very moderate and free-thinking version of Islam. Kashmiriyat also has been broadly very free-thinking. But that has all been changed due to Pakistani interventions. As I mentioned earlier, there is insistence that the Kashmiri women should wear veils. The disputes between Sunnis and Shias, which never existed in Kashmir, they are being revived. Why? Because in Pakistan there is hatred for Shias. Why is there hatred in Pakistan for Shias? Because they are receiving funds from Saudi Arabia, which sends millions and millions of dollars to fund mosques, madrasas, which talk about the Sunni religion as only representing the true Islam, and how Shias are infidels, or even worse than infidels. You know, there are parties, Sunni parties, which go on campaigns to kill Shias in Pakistan. So this kind of Shia-Sunni amity which existed and which could be said to be part of Kashmir, that is being slowly destroyed. Not only this, India did not actually, to be fair to India made its share of mistakes, but they did not try to destroy Kashmiri culture. But as one of the professors says, he goes to attend a wedding of one of his relatives in Pakistani-occupied Kashmir, and he says, you know, I found something very surprising. Nobody in Pakistani-occupied Kashmir could speak Kashmiri. Why? Because in Pakistan, they have imposed Urdu on the entire nation. They have not allowed the flowering of different cultures. So if you go to Pakistan-occupied Kashmir, it has all been Islamized. There is no possibility that people will be speaking in their own Kashmiri language. In the valley, people speak Kashmiri, but in Pakistan-occupied Kashmir, there is no Kashmiri. Everybody speaks Urdu because the Pakistanis, they passed a law that in schools across the nation, only Urdu will be taught. There is no, prospect for local culture to flower. So, as a result of all this, the true Kashmir is under threat from all these, radical Islamists who are crossing over, who are saying that bring back the Sharia law. So, as the professor in the place says, Kashmir will be like a young nubile bride who gets married off to a villain, were it ever to join Pakistan. Pakistan will rape Kashmir day in and day out. Sheikh Abdullah once said, he made this comparison. He said Kashmir is like a young bride which has two suitors, India and Pakistan. But as the professor says, the way Pakistan is, it's a country run by the army, it's not a democracy. You have no rights in Pakistan. There are Human Rights Watch reports which talk about what's happening in Pakistan-occupied Kashmir, which we don't talk about, our media doesn't talk about. So, so there is a great danger to Kashmiriyat from the Pakistani army-administered nation.
So that was it for today. Thank you, Rajesh, for being here with us and talking about your play and telling us about things which many of our viewers probably did not know.
Thanks, Ananya. It's been wonderful to be with you once again to talk about a very sensitive, delicate, but extremely important topic, Kashmir. Kashmir and the expulsion of hundreds of thousands of Kashmiri Pandits who were first forced to leave their ancestral home where their families had lived for thousands of years, who are now homeless or who are refugees in their own country and have been so for decades now with nothing being done to resettle them. And I hope this play and our discussion today will bring back some focus on their plight and what India needs to do to redress the so legitimate grievances of the Kashmiri Pandit community.
Thank you for staying here with us, and we'll be back with yet another video very soon.